Hey, welcome everyone to the latest iLinks Insider session with yours truly, Greg Council, Director of Product Marketing, and my colleague on that side, I think, if you're seeing it, Randy Weekly, our Chief Technology Officer. Today, we have, I'm really excited to share some of the thoughts and everything around how some emerging thoughts around how we view generative AI and how that is intersecting with a number of different things that ImageSource is constantly busy working with our customer partners in developing novel and innovative process automation. So without further delay, let me get into the context building that I always do with slides and basically kind of set the stage for what process automation means, at least to us, and how we're thinking about it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to do the entire screen. And move into this presentation. Okay, so this session title is The Future of Workflow with Generative AI. Before we start, I want to get into a little bit of kind of the T's and C's. The things we're sharing here today, so the information, capabilities, and thoughts are confidential and don't really represent any kind of formal commitment for us to deliver the functionality. So even though you're going to see some of this come to fruition, in some of which in fairly short order, but the intent of this is to give you an early preview of the kind of the thinking we're doing to help us refine, to collaborate, and tell us what's working and what resonates with you, and to potentially even work with you and identify opportunities where we could work together and innovate and find these paths together. So that's the first thing. And I will be following up with each and every one of you to share the video recording, but also to get your input and feedback if you don't share it today. Second piece of it is we want you to join our expanded community. So you are here because of the outreach we're doing to alert you and to announce the expansion of our community to our own iLinks-based hub. And this is pretty exciting because we're using our own technology to provide more community and more value to you and your organizations. And so this combines our support experience that allows you to submit tickets and find out what the status is. And we're tying in the education part of it, iLinks University, which is a free, wonderful educational asset for you and your team, as well as the community. And we're going to continue to grow on this. So please join. The outreach email that I initially sent had a link for you to be able to self-register. And if you need that link again, please give me a shout and I will be more than happy to send it your way. Okay, and again, some of the things that we're looking for your feedback and collaboration on. We're going to share with you some ideas and thoughts, and we'd like to know, or I'd like to know, what part of this presentation makes sense and what doesn't. What needs clarification? What leaves you wanting more, and what do you disagree with? I mean, I'm interested in dissenting views as well. When it comes to your processes, think about how your organization manages processes today and which ones that aren't automated could be. And of those that are automated, are there things that still get stuck? What kinds of work do staff perform within an automated process that you'd love to automate if there were new ways of doing so? And we're going to talk about some of those today. And then lastly, but certainly not least, is what are your needs? You know, we're really interested in understanding what the types of topics, and it can be technology, business, the fusion of technology and business, would benefit you and your organization, and what would you like to become more of an expert on? We're more than happy. I or Randy or one of our technical team is more than happy to jump on a session with you and talk, do some deep dives into specific aspects of process automation and process innovation, so we can jumpstart it and give you more of a boost to proselytize within your organization. So again, we're going to follow up with that. Okay, so now to the big thing. Imagine a process. So this is a process where a citizen wants to build a pergola or some sort of structure on their property that requires a permit. Now what do they do? So for our state and local government customer partners out there, I'm sure you have some knowledge or a deep knowledge of what might happen. As a constituent, I also know what might happen. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's a kind of a mix of a lot of things. So imagine not having to find and do some research and kind of fumble through a website or a myriad of websites to get to the exact permit that you need to find and what you need to do, and then download and complete a complex form that doesn't really have a lot of guidance on how to do it, and then struggle to get that back into a system. And then on the internal side, how staff have to spend a lot of time just evaluating the initial submission and make sure it's complete and valid, and that all the supporting documentation like plans have been submitted. And then you go to this process that evaluates the actual project itself, and having to go and verify that against all sorts of code checks and policies and whatnot. So this is where we're headed, and we're headed there. I mean, I think it's a really interesting time. I read just recently from a McKinsey report that things won't be as slow as we're used to, and that's a little scary, but it's also exciting. So progress is happening at a quick pace. So what we're going to talk today is process automation, and what do we mean by that, and then the continuum of workflow, so a way to think about it. And then we're going to talk about kind of the way that traditional and future process automation works, and it incorporates in that play between staff work and system work, and the merging of that, and then the GenAI piece of it. So when it comes to process automation, you can think about it in a number of different ways. One is it's a sequence of steps. So you order those actions, you create the rules and conditions that determine when one action needs to take place or another. It could be like a reject or an approve. And a lot of these times where you can imagine this kind of process map that you see there, and we've got decision boxes and whatnot. So it's a sequence of steps. But processes don't start without inputs, and they don't complete without some sort of output. So we define what those are. It oftentimes an initial request that 90% of the time still starts with a form, and those forms can be paper forms, PDF forms, increasingly, hopefully, web forms. And then we've got some pretty cool things we're working on that even change the way in your approach about how web forms even work. But it's also all that in-process information that's created, and then of course the deliverables or the outcomes that happen. And then there are always the participants, and those participants span are within the organization and span outside the organization. You've got systems that participate, and all these things coalesce and create what we mean as these main elements and ingredients of process automation. But there's also a continuum. There's a way to think about it in terms of the appropriateness or how you want to go about process automation. And it goes from what I consider, and these are my opinions, you can disagree with them all you want, please do, please submit feedback on that. We've got the RPA side, and RPA from its very purest sense is not very sophisticated workflow at all. What it is it's recording very, very rote steps that can be repeated in a very reliable way. So oftentimes RPA, and again, this is not advanced workflow and BPM. RPA vendors have moved in that direction for necessity. But when we talk about RPA, it's the ability to record steps and processes and then execute those in a very reliable, almost a very binary sense. So example, provision a new email account. We know that if you've got systems that do email, that you've got the ability to you go through specific steps in your system and you can automate those, and the outcome is very binary. It's either created or it's not. So that's RPA. On the workflow and business process management side, this is where we get into this more interactive process between systems and people or stakeholders. So we introduce this multitask management. Sometimes we can have complex workflows that are more sequential, but have a lot of decision making involved in there. They can also create interdependent flows. So one outcome could create completely and spawn a different workflow entirely, and then it needs to come back and do that. So we've got some pretty sophisticated things there. We've got business rules, not RILE. So, but business rules. We've got human intervention is typical. So we've got that very, very common human element in there that is so critical to handle the important things, and I'll get to that in a little bit. And the example is coordinated approval process. It could be a funding or a budget approval. It could be just simple travel expenditure approval. But that's a very common thing where we're shepherding that process through and making it very coordinated. And so on the right hand side, we've got what's the future of this? Can we push these things further and tackle these more complex elements of a workflow or business process, and do that with automation using new forms of AI? especially focusing on areas where humans typically perform it, because there's just nothing available out there. There's nothing easy to do. Even with machine learning, it becomes very difficult. So next, we talk about the staff and the systems, because these are the two major participants in any type of workflow outside of just hardcore RPA, where the system is doing all the work pretty much. Any other workflow or process involves people, because we need to be involved, because we've got experience. We've got the knowledge and expertise to be able to apply things like heuristics. So, quick hand shortcuts about what to do based on our own experience and knowledge or domain expertise. And we can perform complex decision making that's often really difficult to recreate in a rules-based way, or even sometimes in a machine learning-based way. On the other hand, systems do really well with tedious, repetitive work, and that's what we see are such really good benefits with RPA, but also other types of automation. And it's really important to note that there's a lot of benefit you can do with just simple process automation. So just coordinating work and the sequence of that work between different stakeholders. You've got really nice ways of making sure that actions are taking place. And if those actions aren't taking place, alerts go out. And we've got ways of moving work automatically to somebody else if they don't respond in a specific period of time. All these things that together help make a fairly cumbersome, uncoordinated process very reliable. But what we're talking about now is the ability to embed AI into the workflow or the process to make things work even more smoothly and more reliably and consistent. So current state of the art, I would say, is regardless of where you are in your process automation journey, is that you're still working within those constraints that systems do really well with repetitive, tedious, reliable, rote work, and humans do the stuff that systems can't. And that's just the reality. But it soon will not be that reality. So this is where we get into the process of merging generative AI and other forms of and they're just coming out seemingly on a weekly basis. We've got multimodal generative AI, things like visual language models. That's one that uses the combination of text and visual elements like computer vision and can work back and forth. But we've also got that stuff for audio and video as well. And so it's the ability to combine and synthesize this new form of artificial intelligence within a workflow, whether that's a new workflow that's being mapped or an existing one, to do things and automate things and perform tasks that typically require humans. Now, you see on the slide here, it's called agentic workflow. This is a term that is I'm starting to see used on a more repeated basis. I'm also tracking another term called large action models that Randy and I were talking about. He actually brought it up a few weeks back. And for me right now, it's kind of difficult to understand the difference between the two, but there is probably something there. But you may call it just workflow with GenAI. We're still working on what it means to us, and that's what we're going to share with you in just a second. So agentic workflows, really the difference here is we're substituting those rules-based approaches that are embedded within workflows, and we're replacing it with a generative AI agent, and you're going to see words like agents, that's agentic, taking place, and they're doing work on behalf or in assistance to the staff that are involved within these processes. Now, another interesting thing here is it's not just one use of AI, but we all know that if you imagine a process map, we've got multiple steps, and I'll show one in just a second, where agentic workflows, and you can have multiple agents working either in coordination or in sequence to do different activities. And another thing that's really interesting is because generative AI inherently has natural language understanding, it can use all of the information supplied at the beginning of a process and created during a process. And this information is typically text-based, documents, notes, conversations, and it can use that as context. So it's context aware, and it can use that to perform tasks. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So a traditional automated process, let's give you an example. This is one that I just mapped out using our own canvas, our workflow canvas. And in this case, you might have an intake process. Let's talk about the permits, where it starts from your organization as an advanced capture activity. So you've got an input that may be in an e-form, and then we've got documents attached to it. And then the first time that the process starts, we have advanced capture going in and pulling all that information out, putting it in our system of record, which is typically iLinks or another system. And then the staff perform this application intake. They're doing verification. They're doing all sorts of things. If the wrong document is submitted, they go back and say, hey, we need the right document. If the wrong application is submitted, you've got to do some corrections there. Then we go into, and this is very simplistic, but we go into some sort of decision-making process where we're evaluating the information there against all sorts of other things, and ultimately to send a rejection or a confirmation. And then there's some follow-on there. So a lot of human activity involved there. Again, we're benefiting from coordinating a lot of the process and tracking it, but we still rely a lot on staff to do the typically complex things. Now, from an agentic process perspective, what we're talking about is moving a lot of the stuff that typically happens once the process starts ahead of it. So we can create interactive sessions that assist that constituent, that citizen, in understanding what type of application they need, constructing a list of tasks that they need to execute, what types of information they're going to have to pull together, and it can even help them pull together the form. It helps to coordinate a lot of the internal work in terms of understanding what types of information have been submitted in the application, so that staff don't have to verify that. All that can be done before they even open up a case. And then it can also do more complex things with, like, evaluate types of the plans or information within the plans against existing codes. And we're looking at ways of doing that and ways of helping you do that within workflows. And then, of course, it does a lot of the data entry in there. So an agentic process, if we were to layer this up, it takes this existing process automation that we have within iLinks, and we're front-ending it with oftentimes what we call virtual agent or chatbot to do a lot of this interactive work, so that all of this stuff is arguably vetted before it even comes into the organization. And then on the intake side, where the agent, another agent potentially, could be the same technology, but we're providing different policies and guidance to it that evaluates that case data. It can evaluate information against building codes and things to find out if it's in tolerance or out of tolerance. It can take in if it's approved, or once the decision within this on the staff side is approved, it can execute a lot of activities such as doing the enrollment piece of it, sending out notifications, constructing personalized type of correspondence based on information, so that staff don't have to do that. And then on the other side of it, it can do the same thing. It can provide a lot of information in a very personalized way as to why the project hasn't been approved. So we're talking about, I think, the evolution of workflow or business process management using this. So that's about all I have to say in terms of context. I am going to turn it over to Randy to actually show you what we're talking about, and take it away.
All right. Let's see if I can get this right. Okay, can you see my screen, Greg?
Oh, yeah, I have to activate it. Bang, now I can.
All right. So Greg mentioned that one of the concepts around or behind the agentic workflow was to connect advanced AI capabilities together and have them work on data in a sequential manner. So I do something with an LLM, and I take that information, I'm going to do something else with that, or I'm going to use a different model or whatever. And so there's been a bunch of software out there, if you're familiar with the AI industry or been reading or playing around with it, that's been around for a long time, TensorFlow and even, like Greg mentioned, some of the newer terminology like the large action models, and you've got more modern environments. There are more playgrounds and testing grounds like Hugging Face and LangChain and things like that. And I think those are well suited for exploration of AI capabilities, and but they do have some drawbacks if you were to try to implement something from an enterprise perspective. And so what we're trying to do are bring to bear tools that allow you to very quickly bring in these large language models and these AI capabilities directly into your workflow and directly into, as Greg mentioned, our user interfaces as well. So I think in the next few of sessions like this, we're going to start showing you some of these capabilities where we're surfacing these AI capabilities out to your end users so they interact directly with your data in conjunction with these fantastic AI engines. But right now, what I want to show you is the ability to string together these agents, these AI agents and AI capabilities. And what you're seeing right now is just an alpha version. The user interface is going to change, but the code behind this and what we're doing behind this is all real. If you're familiar with iLinks Capture, that's what I'm looking at here. I'm in the administrative client. I have a workflow, very simple, that I've designed, and you'll be able to grab our iLinks AI or whatever we call that workflow activity and drag it out onto your canvas and connect it into your workflow. And what will allow you to do is to create steps within this pipeline that allow you to take any information from your batch and push it into one of these AI engines. So right now, our focus is around Azure. We're a Microsoft shop primarily. Azure has some fantastic engines, but we are already expanding these to use some local LLMs as well. So we have integrations right now with Llama, with Mistral, and we'll be adding other ones like Bloom, and even getting to the point where you can download your own LLM into this environment. And so you get to choose what's best for you. And they all have various capabilities and pros and cons and different sizes depending on the number of indexes and the token count, context windows, and all these different parameters that are suited for what you're trying to do. But today I just wanted to show you just a quick example of what I put together here in this pipeline. As I mentioned, this is the Azure Document Intelligence step here, and I have the ability to select any of the pre-built Azure models. They're coming out with these every month, so you've got some really great things: invoice, of course, receipts, ID documents, so these are driver's licenses and passports, all kinds of tax forms. So you can pick any of those, and then you pick a document from your batch that you want to put into this element of the pipeline. Once it comes through that model, what do you want to do with the output? So key value pairs is one of the very powerful capabilities for all of these pre-trained models that Microsoft is putting out. So you can put a document in, and they're going to give you a set of these keys and values that it found in the documents. And those are going to be different. If you're using an invoice model, those keys are going to be very invoice specific, obviously. And if you're doing a HICVA form or a driver's license, those keys and sets of keys are going to be very different. But we can take that and auto match them into your batch fields. We can do the same with the source documents, and then we get a ton of information back. So if you need to use the JSON results, so JSON is a data format, it's very human readable. We can provide that. You can store that as a new document. So we'll see an example of what that looks like. We could put that into a custom batch profile if you want that hidden from the user. There's no reason they need to see it, but you need it later in either this step or later in your workflow. We can store the raw OCR, very common and very handy for downstream processing. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to match all my batch fields, match the source document fields to what I get back from these Azure services, store the JSON, and store the raw OCR. So as I step down through these little pipeline elements, I can use that information that I've already collected. So in this case, I'm going to run some stuff through Azure OpenAI. So if you're familiar with OpenAI's ChatGPT, Microsoft has a relationship with them, and they have this engine up on Azure. So we're going to take the raw OCR that we generated in the previous step, and we're going to run that through a prompt. So we allow you to create instructions for the chat completion. So if you don't know about this, don't worry about it. We provide some basic defaults. You can tell it that you want to return information. So I want to map this information back into my batch. So I need, if I'm getting different fields back, I need to return that in a JSON format so that then we can do that mapping. And we've got a quick access button here that allows you to generate that JSON structure so that you can pass it into the LLM and get that information back in the structure that you need. You can also use merge tags in your prompt. So if you've got information that's important for the LLM to know as you're generating this content, we'll automatically put those tags in there. And then you can test this. So I can go out and browse out and find a sample document and run that. And so I can test my results right here in the interface. And then what do I want to do with the results? I want to store that summary that I'm asking for in a batch field. I also want to auto match that back to that original input document that I started this whole process with. And then lastly, I want to take the OCR again. This time, I want the LLM to take a look at that, and then in this case, it's an agreement, and give me a hint on what might be wrong with this agreement that's going through my workflow. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to pop over here to my iLinks capture system, and we're going to run right through that workflow. So I've got the pipeline test set up. I've got a demo doc. We're going to put it into our input. So in this case, this is just a very simple file. We've got some structured information at the top, which lends itself very well to KVP extraction. So we'll get some of that information out. We can apply that to our batch, if you recall our configuration for our pipeline. Then we've got the contract verbiage down below. And we could definitely go in here and we could pull out the total sales price. We could pull the vendor number. LLMs are really good at pulling information out of narrative text like this. Excuse me. So unstructured content, not a problem for the LLMs. We've gotten fantastic results from grabbing information out of that. So I'm going to submit this. We'll go back over here. I ran some tests yesterday, so these are all from 7/23. So in about 6 seconds, we'll see another batch pop in here that'll be from today, just now. So this isn't smoke and mirrors. We're really processing that through these pipelines. So I'm logged in as an admin, so let me download all this stuff. So here's our raw OCR document. We asked that it generate a new document. So here's all of our raw OCR that came out of that file that we provided. I'm having some weird behavior here because of the presentation thing. I can't scroll for some reason, but
yeah.
Actually, my entire browser is locked up.
Too many tabs.
Yeah, who knows? Okay, I got it back now. Okay, let me go down here to the JSON results. So we don't view JSON in our viewer, but I can open this up, and this is all of that JSON that comes back from those servers. So it's a massive amount of information. Super handy if you need to do some downstream processing on that. Here's our original input document.
Cool.
So we've done that automatic KVP extraction with auto match into our document. So this is all done automatically through that the JSON that was requested. And so here's all the values that it's pulled out of the structured. Here's the summary. So we asked it to do a summary of this. So this is looking at the entire document, and we could, in this case, I said, limit your response to 400 characters because we're sticking it into a 400 character field. But that could be helpful if you think about a contract. This is easy, right? But if you think about a 100-page contract, having a quick summary that you can look at a glance could be very powerful. So let's go back up here to the summary document. This is super cool because what we did in that last step, if you recall, is we took the OCR information and we asked the LLM to look for any type of potential issues or inconsistencies within that contract. So here we're not using any information that we've provided, which I want to show you something very quickly after this. We're just asking the LLM to look at the data and see if it finds anything, and it did, in fact. So it found that there were inconsistent addresses for Billy Joe Redneck, and in that document there are 2 different addresses listed. It found an event date, and it found an effective date of the contract buried in that narrative, and they're different. It's, in fact, the event date is before, so that could be an issue. Hickville, USA is likely fictional because it's not really a place, and it may not have applicable laws. There's no terms for late payments. There's no interest rate specified. What happens if the vehicle is damaged or destroyed during this period where the title has not been released to the buyer, no dispute resolution, etc. So these are generic things. But real quick, let me show you one of the things that we are in the process of working on right now is an assistant, an Azure assistant capability. So an assistant is kind of it's an add-on to an LLM where you can provide it a set of documents, and the LLM will use those documents to assist in the creation of whatever you're asking for. So one thing that we could do that would be super powerful is to codify a set of rules for our agreements or our contracts that say, you know, we only take agreements from North America. The effective date has to be the same as the sign date, you know, and we define what those rules look like, and then we add those documents into our assistant. Now we have some very solid rules that we can apply. In our example before, it was just using the LLM to look at the information within the contract and find if there were things missing, just based on how that model had been trained for agreements. Here, we're using our specific information. So in this case, our assistants will also be able to point to one of your iLinks repositories so that you could put all of your previous contracts in there, and you can do things like, oh, we've got a new contract coming in for Acme Supply. How is this contract different from last year's contract? And on a 100-page document, if I could have a snapshot of a summary of those differences, that could be very helpful in helping me assess, okay, where are the changes? Where do I need to go look? And then just like we did here, based on our codified list of rules for an acceptable contract, where are some inconsistencies, places that I need to go look? So it's going to draw my attention into those documents. Of course, we'll caveat this like everyone caveats, some of this new generative AI capability. You cannot trust these results 100%. So this is really just a second opinion, if you will, really just to help draw your attention to the key areas that you're looking at. All right, I'm going to turn this back over to you, Greg.
Thank you. That is so cool. So, what I take from all this is that this really doubles down the need for something to orchestrate these things, whether they're human-oriented tasks or system-to-system types of things, or AI. And so, our view of it is we're putting this in our workflow engine because that's our secret sauce. That's the thing that keeps things going and guided and assured. And it just adds I think the whole concept of we were talking about this previously, just before this, the whole concept of whether it's a large action model or agentic workflow or process automation, you need some sort of orchestration behind it or that process, that workflow engine. And so we're making use and we're finding new value and utility for our tried and true and reliable workflow engine. So super exciting. And so we've just got a few more minutes. I promised one more thing, which was a preview of something we've had in the works for a while, and that's our upcoming product around advanced capture of the document size. So Randy, you showed some things that we can do and construct within a pipeline. This is what I'm about to show you is pre-built, so it's pre-constructed, and just is designed to just significantly remove a lot of the arduous tasks and the tuning that you typically require. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to pull up something. Here we go. And all right. So Randy just showed you the workflow canvas and how we incorporate AI in here. And this is, again, our handy dandy workflow canvas. And we've got some new things here, AI doc classify and AI doc extract. So I'm just going to focus on this one. So the idea here is that we're moving towards a very workflow oriented perspective because we all live within processes. And so doesn't it make sense to define these workflows and how they should be and then add the capabilities within it? So that's what we're doing. So I'll move into the configuration really quickly. And we've got a new UI. So the idea here is is, and if you've had any kind of work with advanced capture, traditional advanced capture, you have scars and wounds that are, you know, both you know, of all sorts, and I share your pain, because I've lived in this world for more than 12 years. And so the biggest pieces of it are the ability to just remove the tedious work and make things easier so they scale. So what I've done is I've just created a vehicle registration, and I've created some fields within our workflow profile. And now I'm going to add a document in here. And I haven't done anything in terms of configuring fields or anything like that, except just define what fields out of this document I want to grab. So I've just added this document, and then I'm just going to hit the magical execute button, which does really cool magic, because without me having to draw boundaries or zones or type data or anything like that, it's going to find all of the information and populate it within my workflow profile fields just like that. So from an advanced capture perspective, how often have you been assigned, if you've done this work, a variety of forms, even if it's just one, and spent days perfecting it? And what you just saw, and this is real, is I did that in about, I don't know, was anybody counting 30 seconds? So that's pretty exciting. And then of course, we have that configuration, and we can add any number of documents and then test these documents. I've already gone through here because there's some time, but we can see here that it is reliably pulling all this information in and identifying it. And we're making use of some pretty advanced AI models focused on the concept of keyword value extraction to provide the fundamentals, and then we're layering on top of that a lot of really goodies. So more to come later this year, and we'll be expanding on what I just showed you. But let me show you one more thing. So if that didn't excite you enough, the idea of being able to pull out data out of a document that simply, then I don't know what excites you, but this should. So this is a proof of concept. You can see here, I'm just pulling off some code. This is going to be part of an add-on to our upcoming Advanced Capture AI that merges and utilizes more natural language processing to be able to automatically discover and then configure your project. So I just showed you pulling up a form and automatically finding the information that I have. In this case, I didn't define a thing. I didn't define what fields I wanted. It automatically goes and will discover key fields or key information in here, including some unstructured information, and it would allow me to create new fields. So some of this we're borrowing. We're as we go, we're merging concepts. So some of the things Randy just showed you, I can go in and use traditional KVP or traditional modern KVP extraction, but I can also merge and utilize local large language models, whether they're local or Azure based, to do some pretty cool summarization. But then we're not finished. Once I'm here, we're kind of flipping things on its head. I can generate the solution within iLink's intelligent workflow that automatically defines the batch, the fields, and everything. Again, further taking down all that tedious work into something that arguably takes a few minutes to get into a workable format, and then you can take it from there. So you might have not seen a whole lot from us in terms of how we're approaching large language models or generative AI at all, but we've been thinking about it, and we've been working with it for the past 2 years now, Randy. I think we're coming, and we're just keeping up with it, and it's hugely exciting. So again, so that concludes this session. I just want to finish off by asking all of you, and again, I promise I will follow up for your input and feedback. The content, the material we had today, what left you confused? What do you want to dig into more? Would you like to help us move this technology that you've just seen along according to your specific organizational needs? You've got documents, you've got processes. Please contact us. We're looking right now for willing partners to collaborate with so that we can move this and bulletproof it, and you get the benefit of having stuff almost tailor-made for you. So please reach out to me. You've got my email. All of you received a reminder just before this, or and again, we can talk about it when I follow up. So again, thank you very much. Randy, thank you as always for sharing what you're doing within your iLinks labs. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Greg.